like I've said time and time again, these racist ass cops masquerading as police officers, aka race soldiers, that's who they truly are. It doesn't matter that you're pregnant. It doesn't matter that you're, and I literally mean this, it doesn't matter that you're a newborn baby. It doesn't matter that you're elderly, a quadriplegic. If you are born into this system of racism, white supremacy, and you're classified as black, your weapon that they see as a threat is your skin, your melanin. And so they'll do whatever they can do to make sure that this murder of a 30-year-old woman who is pregnant with 4 children is a justifiable homicide. They'll find a way to say, yeah, man, I was in fear of my life. Sure, she's pregnant. Sure, she has 4 other children. Sure, she doesn't look physically imposing. Sure, I was still in fear of my life. That pregnant woman who probably weighs about 120 pounds, I was in fear of my life. Therefore, I had to shoot to kill. And I had to do it multiple times. And so, because of the system that we live in of racism, white supremacy, aka systemic oppression, because of that narrative, the police officer or the so-called police officer will most likely get off. Now, of course, you don't want that to happen, but based off past history, especially with the past ruling of the Philando Castillo case, you're going to expect that to happen based off past history, right? So again, this is the pattern that we see. This is the continuous pattern that we see with these justifiable homicides by these race soldiers, right? These so-called police officers. The pattern that we see is the continuance of injustices of unarmed black men, women, and children being murdered, gunned down by these so-called police officers. This is a pattern and condition that's been happening since the inception of law enforcement, since the Judiciary Act of 1789. And I'm going to talk about Colin Kaepernick's stance of the Philando Castillo case. I'm going to get into that. But I've said this many times, family. Law enforcement since inception, they were only created to do one thing. That was to capture and or kill runaway slaves. 4 years later, after the 1789 Judiciary Act, you had the Fugitive Slave Act of 1793. That's exactly what Colin Kaepernick was talking about, right? When he did the tweet about you can't ignore your history, runaway slave patrol, always remember who they are. Now, I've been saying that since day one. Colin Kaepernick been knew what time it is. Now he's been woke, It's great to see somebody evolve, especially with information. When he came into the league, obviously he was not like what he is now. Nobody saw this coming. Nobody saw Colin Kaepernick, leading the charge and speaking out against social injustices in the NFL and in sports in general. Nobody saw that coming. But it's great to see somebody like that evolve, right? And, it's like I said, it's great to see somebody like that involved and actually doing tangible things in the community. And keeping the face, right? Putting the foot on the neck of white supremacists in this country and around the world by making this tweet and informing the general public of the history of the so-called law enforcement officers, Blue Lives Matter and all that BS, right? It's great to see that, right? But like I said, the Judiciary Act of 1789 was only created to capture and or kill runaway slaves. That's it. And so now, right, post 21st century that we live in today, things have evolved, but things have not really changed. The system that we live in is still systemic oppression. People classified as black are still being mistreated, still being dominated, still being subjugated, still being executed, marginalized, etc. on a day-to-day basis. People classified as black are continuing to be killed, right? Unarmed by these so-called police officers and getting away with murder by just simply saying I was in fear of my life. That's all you have to say. I was in fear of my life, therefore I had to shoot this pregnant woman who has children. I know this woman is, like I said, is physically not imposing. I still had to shoot and kill. It's that simple. This woman is 30 years old. Charleena Lyles. It was reported that she had a knife. She called the police officers to investigate a burglary. And these so-called police officers, these race soldiers, they had to kill her. They're trained to do that. They've been trained to do that. It's a system, like Colin Kaepernick says. It doesn't need to be changed, revised. It needs to be dismantled, just like this broken system of injustice. It needs to be completely wiped out and replaced with a system of justice. Right? But again, don't be surprised if this continues to be a justifiable homicide. They'll find a way to say these so-called police officers will find a way to say I was in fear of my life. The jury will buy the story and the verdict will be not guilty. We saw that with the Philando Castillo case. We continue to see this particular pattern. We continue to see this pattern where the so-called police officers, these race soldiers, get away with murder, right? Then comes the protests, right? There comes the possible riots, all the outrage, the marching, right? All the hashtags on social media. The cycle never will end until we replace this system. Shout out to my brother Daryl Cluis. I saw his video about starting a boycott with social media platforms. Like, of course, like I've said this and he knows this as well. I've been in the IT infrastructure industry, the IT industry, period, for 15 years. And so me, right, using YouTube, using Google's infrastructure to get my message across, it's what I have to do right now because logistically, we don't have the resources to replace a website like Google or something like Facebook or Instagram, Snapchat. We are starting to do that on a smaller level, which is why you can support independent black-owned social media websites like blackspot.com, like Tariq's More Us, right? And there's a couple of others out there. But they have to be funded. We have to come together and continue to support them financially so they can have better infrastructure long term. The long-term goal is to not depend on any of the dominant white society's resources from top to bottom in all 9 areas of activity: economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. That's the long-term goal. We cannot depend on their resources. Right? So this pattern that we see with these justifiable homicides by these race soldiers that they get off not guilty of murdering and executing people classified as black who are unarmed. That pattern will continue to happen until we not only replace this system of injustice with a system of justice, but have all of our own independent resources. Like I said before. Right? So, like I said, family, don't be surprised that this is what's going to happen, obviously. You see this pattern before. police officer or the police officers, whoever they were, these so-called police officers who were involved in the shooting, death, right, of this woman in Seattle, Charleena Lyles, they'll be put on paid administrative leave. They'll be suspended with pay. Of course, it's always like that. They'll do a so-called investigation. Then the trial happens. They'll get the jury, investigation. The victims' relatives speak out. Of course, they'll say, this was wrong. You got the Black Lives Matter advocates coming out. The whole routine. That's going to happen. The trial happens, and based on past history, these so-called police officers were involved will get away with murder. Not guilty. And of course, like I said, the marching, the protests will happen. Maybe a riot will happen. Hashtags will happen. People will speak out against how bad it is. Same pattern. But again, long term, we have to stop depending on every single resource owned and controlled by the dominant white society so we can make sure that these patterns don't continue to happen. It's that simple. All right, family. So those are my thoughts on that. I'll continue to follow up on this story in Seattle with the death of Charleena Lyles. Rest in peace to her. And my condolences go out to her and her family and her children. It's unfortunate, family. It's definitely unfortunate. Leave your comments down below about the story. Let me know what you guys think. All right, family. Chauncey, a.k.a. The Black Separatist. Make sure you follow me on social media at The Black Separatist. All right. Chauncey, a.k.a. The Black Separatist, signing out. Peace.